Hello everyone, it's nice to see you one more time and welcome to our next to last English session, sorry. So what are we going to study? What are we going to do today? Okay, first of all, because this is our last week of work, we're going to focus on the last activity. But before focusing on our last activity, taking into account the schedule and taking into account the learning guide, we're going to focus first on something else. Because as soon as you finish this course on the 18th, English That's Work Level 5 will start. Therefore, we invite you to join, enroll in the English courses and take the course with us. And that information you are going to need to enroll to level 5 is already in Zayuna. So in order to be able to do that, I'm going to switch to Spanish for a moment so you can better understand what I'm mentioning here. So you can be able to join, to log in into to enroll into level 5. Switch to Spanish now. Bien, siendo esta la última semana de trabajo y siendo esta la penúltima sesión de formación, ¿cierto? Los queremos invitar de paso para el nivel número 5 de inglés, la sesión, el último nivel que nosotros tenemos en Sena Agroindustrial, tomando en cuenta de que usted ya va a terminar este nivel 4, ¿cierto? Para eso la información usted ya la tiene en Sayuna. Entonces en Sayuna, cuando usted abre la documentación, abre la plataforma con sus credenciales, y va hasta su nivel, el nivel que le corresponde, en este caso nivel 4, y va hasta donde dice sesiones en línea, que es donde está toda la información importante, las grabaciones, los links de inscripción a los siguientes niveles y los resúmenes de cada sesión, ¿cierto? Cuando usted abra grabaciones y sesiones en línea, nos vamos a ver que en todas las semanas está un documento que se llama Correo Bolsa Corporativa, ¿cierto? A partir de la semana 5, de la sesión 5 más bien, y entre la semana 1 y 4 se llama Formato Publicitario. Una vez descargamos el documento, ¿cierto? Vamos a encontrar que este documento nos dice un tutorial de inscripción a nuestros cursos de inglés con el nivel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 y demás. Y como nos corresponde a nosotros ingresar al nivel 5, lo que vamos a hacer, una vez terminado este curso, claro, pero la idea es que usted se vaya inscribiendo desde ya. Usted ya sabe si lo va si tiene el acceso, la disponibilidad de tiempo y demás para de una vez inscribirse a nivel 5, o si de pura casualidad usted no puede ingresar al nivel 5 porque, digamos, tuvo algún inconveniente y necesita repetir el nivel 4, también la información está allí. Pero vamos a suponer que usted efectivamente va a ingresar al nivel 5 porque usted ha estado muy juicioso haciendo todas sus actividades. Lo que vamos a hacer es copiar el hipervínculo y lo vamos a pegar en un navegador cualquiera. En mi caso particular, no me funciona en Mozilla, ¿cierto? Así que y es posible que a usted le salga algo parecido. Error, ocurrió un error al momento de realizar la consulta. Está bien. Si es ese el caso, lo que vamos a hacer es abrir el documento, abrir la página en otro navegador. Si no funciona tampoco en otro navegador, una de las opciones que podemos hacer, tomar en cuenta, es abrir en modo incógnito y normalmente los modos incógnitos sí son funcionales. Si definitivamente el modo incógnito tampoco es funcional, vamos a revisar si funciona en ventana privada, modo incógnito. Entonces, lo que vamos a hacer es esperar unas pocas horas, unos pocos días, ¿cierto? Igual tenemos tiempo para inscribirnos. Como les decía, este curso va a empezar ya el 18, ¿cierto? Entonces, en este caso la página está un poquito caída, pero lo que podemos hacer es, como le digo, esperar un par de días. Y una vez hayamos ingresado al curso, hayamos abierto el link que nos corresponde, vamos a escribir siempre, vamos a darle clic siempre al botoncito verde. Entonces, inscripción, ¿cierto? Luego nos va a pedir un código. Vamos a escribir este número y vamos a decir que somos parte de Sena, porque efectivamente somos parte de Sena. Luego bajamos un poquitico, le vamos a dar a inscribir o continuar, creo que ese es el botoncito verde que está más abajo, no registrarse, sino el de abajo. Y luego le va a decir al correo ppperez@gmail.com, me invento el correo, le llega la notificación de que usted está inscrito o inscrita. ¿Listo? Una vez hecho eso, pues usted ya solamente debe esperar a que se le asigne el tutor virtual, que como le digo, la fecha de inicio del próximo curso es el día 18, es decir, de este viernes, de esta semana al siguiente. ¿Listo? Para que lo tenga como referencia, para que usted continúe en su proceso educativo, proceso formativo con nosotros en SENA. ¿Vale? Un pequeño dominical, una pequeña introducción a lo que íbamos a mencionar en esta ocasión. Bien, habiendo dicho eso, ahora sí, vamos a hacer el switch y vamos a irnos con lo que nos corresponde. I'm going to switch to English in this moment. So, according to the learning guide and according to the schedule, today and on Saturday, we're going to study topics that are going to help us to develop this activity, video presentation, anecdote. So we have until the 16th of October to complete all activities and to present our evidences, right? And according to the learning guide says, en el año 2020 ocurrieron una serie de eventos que cargaron muchos cambios en las esferas de nuestra vida, pero sobre todo a nivel social y laboral, debido a políticas necesarias como el distanciamiento social. En relación con la temática estudiada en el componente formativo Things I Was Doing Before, ahorita miramos dónde está eso, realice una presentación por medio de un video corto activando su cámara web, con el fin de identificar y describir cómo eran sus rutinas laborales y sociales antes de marzo 2020, qué estaba haciendo, qué actividades llevaba a cabo durante el distanciamiento y que no pudo seguir realizando. Y todo eso lo vamos a utilizar con el tiempo pasado progresivo o pasado continuo, que es exactamente lo mismo. Okay? So, in general, we're going to answer to these questions. What were you doing before March 2020? What projects were you working on? What were you studying? What sports were you playing? And so on. The idea is for you to present video, to upload a video, maybe perhaps possibly on YouTube, if you want to upload it in YouTube, or if you want to upload it in the platform in a MP4, format, it would be okay. Or maybe in Camtasia, the idea is, well, not Camtasia, in Canva, I'm sorry. And the idea is for you to present 3 or 4 slides with text and you speaking and showing yourself, showing your face, talking about these topics, these activities you were doing before pandemic. Okay, this is the activity you are going to present, and the objective is for you to expose yourself talking between 2 and 5 minutes. No more than 5 minutes, no less than 2 minutes. Okay, so what are we going to need to develop this activity? According to the learning guide, we are going to focus in a componente formativo called Things I Was Doing Before. Where are we going to find that? Okay, so we log in Sayuna, and in Sayuna we open the course English Task Work Level 4. That's a little evident, right? That's coherent. When we go there, we look for the Guía de Aprendizaje link, and then here we are going to find componente formativo, Things I Was Doing Before. This is something the learning guide is telling us. to look for, right? When we open the link and click here to access to the educational resource, we're going to find here some topics that we are going to use in order to be able to develop our evidence. Past progressive, reported speech, let's talk about the work, and so on. So you have already done this before in level 3, 2, and 1, and therefore this is not new. You already know the methodology of this platform in Zayuna. Therefore, I'm not going to focus here, but I'm going to focus on something else, something additional here in the platform. Once again, in the platform, the link available for you to present your activity, I'm going to switch for a moment. I'm going to change the role for a second. Yeah, so the available link for you to upload this evidence is here in Guía de Aprendizaje, and then in Video Presentación Anécdota. Okay, so once again, it's a video where you expose yourself talking about what you were doing before 2020. So clicking Agregar Entrega, and in there you are going to upload your video or your link to YouTube, and that would be all. Okay, so this is everything we need to take into account to be able to present our evidence. Vale? Okay, thank you very much, Learning Guide. Thank you very much, Schedule, and thank you very much, Zayuna. Goodbye and see you on Saturday. And now let's go with the topics, because according to the Learning Guide, we are going to learn something related to past continuous tense or a past progressive tense, because past progressive is another name of past continuous. It's like a friend that you have, and his name or her name is Andrés Felipe Gomez. Sometimes you call him Andrés. Some of his friends call him, another friends, call him Felipe. And maybe in high school he was called with his last name, so Gomez, Mr. Gomez, right? Or maybe in a formal environment, everybody called him Mr. Gomez, and that's correct. Andrés Felipe Gomez. Some people call him Andrés, another people call him Felipe, and another call him with his last name. And this is acceptable. This is correct. This is possible. The same happens with past continuous. We can call this tense past continuous, and at the same time, we can call it past progressive. So we're going to focus in past progressive in order to be able to mention what activities you were doing before 2020, before pandemic, right? So why is past progressive important? What do we need to know? What do we need to learn from this tense, right? Before everything, before we develop our activity. Before we be able to develop our activity, we need to understand past progressive, and before to understand how past progressive works, we also need to understand verbs. We already know what is a verb because we have been working with them since level 1, right? You know that verbs are regular and irregular. We have already studied that verbs in past form can be regulars and irregulars. Regulars because they are called irregulars because the past form and the past participle form is exactly the same, and we add ed at the end of the verb, and the sound could be like to, do, id, depending on the context. We already know that. And with the regular verbs, we need to do a memoristic activity, right? So, but another way to mention, another way to relate, another way to talk about verbs is that verbs can be stative and dynamic verbs. What is a dynamic verb? You have already seen this in level 2, but it's important to remember this. A dynamic verb, also called an action verb or a movement verb, as its name says it, it's a verb that relates movement by people, animals, objects, and so on. For example, running. When you run, you move your body, right? Or like when you walk, walking. When you walk, you are making some kind of movement. Singing. When you sing in a karaoke, your throat moves, your body moves, and maybe you dance at the same time, right? So dancing. So all of these verbs are action verbs or dynamic verbs or mm, movement verbs. But you don't need to move your body in order to take into account an action verb. I mean, it's obviously a movement verb, but not only include a movement from your body. Action verbs also include activities that are developed with your brain, like thinking, like planning, like creating, right? Because you cannot see movement at somebody else's body, but there's something happening in their minds, in their brains, right? So this is an action verb. On the other hand, we also have stative verbs, and stative verbs are related to thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, perceptions, possession, senses, and measurement. So, in other words, they describe states of existence. And the most important verb in here, the king verb of an stative verb, is the verb to be. Another way to think in stative verbs is when they are not generating movement. It's like or yes or no. You can be here, you can be in your house, or no. You cannot be divided in two. I mean, right? You can be you can be loved or no. You can like the food or no, right? This is like the situation of an stative verb. They don't generate movements. There are some exceptions with verbs because the verb to have is also a very important verb. It's very known as an stative verb. But depending on the context, some verbs can be stative and at the same time dynamic. I mean, in different contexts. Right? That's what I'm saying. For example, I'm having a headache. This is happening in a period of time, right? This is a movement. This is generating a movement. Versus I have a dog. In this case, the verb to have, once again mentioned, is an stative verb, right? So because of that, because we already know what's the difference between an action verb and a stative verb, now we can think, now we can mention that stative verbs are not compatible with any continuous tense. So they cannot be used with past continuous, future continuous, present continuous, and with their last names, perfect continuous, present perfect continuous, past perfect continuous, or future perfect continuous. They cannot be used on those situations. They can only in the only possibility for the only useful verbs are action verbs. They are compatible with every continuous tense, not stative verbs. So what do we do with stative verbs then? Okay, so we use them in a bigger context. So with simple tenses, we cannot use them with continuous tenses, but we can use them with simple tenses. For example, I'm sorry, we cannot say I was stressed yesterday during my, sorry, I cannot say I was being stressed yesterday during my science test, because or you are stressed or you are not stressed, right? It describes a state of being. It could be also an existence, a state of existence, seeming, or knowledge, or knowing, right? Because of that, we use the verb to be in this case, was being is not possible, is not compatible. We use it in a bigger context. What's the bigger context? The bigger context is past simple, in this case with verb to be. I was stressed, right? Let's go with another example. Another example. I was knowing all the answers. This cannot last for a period of time. So, and this is a state of knowing. That's why this is an stative verb. So you cannot know for a period of time and then forget everything. So you don't know anything, you understand, you know something for, I don't know, one day, and then you forget it for all your life. This is, at least in English, is not compatible, it's not possible. In this case, we use it with a bigger context. And we say, I knew all the answers, right? We cannot say I was knowing. Instead, we say I knew all the answers. So these are two examples of stative verbs and dynamic verbs. We cannot use stative verbs with continuous tenses. I mean, we cannot use verbs like with present continuous, past continuous, or future continuous because it's not compatible. They are not compatible. Instead, we need to use action verbs or dynamic verbs. About dynamic verbs or action verbs or movement verbs, because this is the same, this is exactly the same. We are going to do something that we did in present continuous. We are going to add ing at the main verb in general to create this verb, like work, working, right? I was working in the United States until 2021, let's suppose that. First situation. Second situation, the modification, because we are going to need two kind of verbs with every single continuous tense. We are going to need the verb to be on the first hand and a dynamic verb on the second hand. The dynamic verb is going to be modified. How are we going to modify, change this action verb? We're going to add ing, as we already mentioned. But not just that. I mean, if we only had to do that, and that would be all, we would be in Disney. And no, we are not in Disney. We need to know something else. So this is the main rule. This is the most important and frequent and easier rule. Because every time we're going to add ing, but with some exceptions, some additional asterisks. Because if we have verb that ends in E and the E doesn't sound dance, make, create, for example, they all end in E in terms of typing or writing. But in terms of pronunciation, the E disappears. Therefore, when we have these situations, the E is deleted before we add ing, make and making. What else do we need to know? If we have a verb with one syllable, I mean, we pronounce a vowel in only one, we cannot divide a word in different sounds of vowel. For example, create, this has two syllables. Make, it has only one sound of a vowel, therefore we cannot divide the word like make, right? So we cannot do that. So when we have a verb with only one syllable, and additionally we have the consonant, vowel, consonant ending, right? The last consonant is going to be doubled. In this case, swim. We cannot say su im. Instead, we need to mention the word without any pause. Swim, right? So it ends in consonant, vowel, and consonant. If this is the case, the last consonant in this case M is going to be double. Swim, swimming. Every time? No, not every time, because we are not going to double the W, the X, and the Y. And finally, when we have this IE ending, right, we are going to change, we're going to modify, we're going to replace this group of vowels that in Spanish, you know, it's a diphthongo, right? We're going to replace it with Y before we add ing, die and die. So, in terms of grammar, we need to remember that we are going to use two verbs. The verb to be as an auxiliary verb and the main verb that's going to be modified adding ing, and this main verb has to be an action verb, a movement verb, a dynamic verb, right? So we already know this. We have been studying this. Okay, so why is it important to study the past continuous tense? I mean, why do we use it? Well, we use it for many reasons. So we have six in fact. And I'm going to mention them from the most important, I mean, in terms of usage, right? Frequency, I mean, to the least used reason. So the first and most important reason why we study past continuous tense is that we are talking about an action in past, a long action that was interrupted by something else. Something else can be another action, another event, a moment in the time, right? Anything that stops the big action. For example, I was walking to the station. This is the big story. But then this story is interrupted by something else when I met John, right? When I met John, I was walking to the station. The biggest action, the most important action, the independent action in this case, is going to be stopped for a period of time or for all eternity. It doesn't matter. It's going to be what is important for us to understand is that it's going to be interrupted, and in this case, it's interrupted by the idea, by the situation that I met John. I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him in the last 5 years, let's suppose. Another example. At 3 o'clock, we were working. So the big activity is that we all were working, and the situation that interrupted this, this is like a screenshot, is that this happened at 3 o'clock. Maybe at 4 o'clock we were not working; we were having a break. Maybe at 3 o'clock, I'm sorry, at 2:50 o'clock, at 2:50, sorry, no, without a clock, at 2:50 p.m. maybe we were, I don't know, not working, but we were in a meeting, and this is different, right? So a big action is interrupted by something else. This is the most important reason. Second reason, we are going to use past continuous tense to indicate, to mention a series of parallel actions. So we have two actions, two situations if you want, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, until the infinite, and all of them were happening at the same time. Like for example, while Helen was reading this section number 1 at 4:35 p.m., this is what was happening yesterday. At the same time, 4:35 p.m. of yesterday, the team was watching television. All of that, all those activities, both situations, were happening at the same time yesterday at 4:35. That's it. Third situation, we used past continuous to mention repetition, especially for habits that didn't last for a lot of time, maybe 1 month, maybe one semester, a quarter, maybe 1 year, but not forever, right? And because this is something temporary, we are going to mention, but it was intense. This was intense. We are going to use, sorry, adverbs like forever, constantly, and always to mention that this activity was very intense during the time it was happening, right? It happened in the past for a period of time, but now it's not happening. I mean, it's over today. For example, my aunt last year was constantly watching soap operas. Last year, because this year she is not doing that anymore. That was a habit that lasted for 6 months, 1 year, maybe 3 years, but she doesn't do it anymore because she has something else to do, right? Let's suppose that. A fifth situation, we use past progressive to emphasize that something lasted for a while or continued for some time. In this case, the important thing to take into account is the time. We are emphasizing the time, the period of time. So a month, a year, a week, an hour, a day. What matters to us is the duration of this activity, the time, right? We were working all day, all week, for an hour. We are emphasizing the duration of the activity. And finally, we use wonder with past continuous tense to make polite requests. For example, I was wondering, I don't know, I would like to know, I appreciate if you could tell me, is something like that. I was wondering if you could babysit for me tonight because I'm going to be a little busy and I want to go to my mathematics classes. Let's suppose that, right? So this is why we study past continuous tense. Remember, past continuous tense is also called past progressive. Past progressive or past continuous tense uses two kinds of verbs. The verb to be on the first hand and an action verb on the other hand. The action verb is also going to be called a dynamic verb or movement verb, right? And this action verb or movement verb is going to be modified. And the way we are going to modify it is by adding ing with some additional traits, of course. And we also said that past continuous tense is important to mention that activities that were interrupted in the past because something happened in the past and was interrupted by something else in the past for a period of time, for a situation, or for another situation. First. Second, we use past continuous to talk about activities that were in parallel. So two activities, three, four, five activities that were happening at the same time in the past. Third, we use past continuous to mention repetition, something that happened repeatedly in the past, right? Three. Four, we use past continuous to emphasize the duration of an activity that happened in the past, of course. And fifth, we use the past continuous with the word wonder in order to be able to make a polite request. That's it. Let's go with grammar. In terms of grammar, we have already mentioned that we need two verbs. Verb to be on the first hand and the other verb on the other hand. We already know how we are going to modify the dynamic verb. You have already studied it today. And we have already studied how verb to be works. right? How this is conjugated in past, because it can be was or were. We studied this not in this session, but maybe 2 weeks ago, I guess. I don't really remember. I think it was last week, I think. But we know that the conjugation of verb to be is was or were. We are going to use were for all plurals, and we are going to use was for all singulars. So I, he, she, it, we use the conjugation of verb to be as was. That's it. We also know, but we want to remember that the conjugation of verb to be in negative sentences is was not or wasn't, and were not or weren't, depending of if you want to use the contraction. And finally, we already know too that verb to be in past continuous, sorry, is very similar to present continuous tense in terms of grammar, because we need a person or a group of people that are doing something or were doing something. In present progressive, I'm going to switch for a second in here. Yeah. In present continuous, we had affirmative, negative, and question, right? With an affirmative sentence, we need a person who is doing something. Mariana está estudiando. Mariana is studying, right? With past continuous, there is a lot of similarities here. It's very similar because we need a person who was doing something in the past. Mariana estaba jugando. Mariana was playing. Let's remember that the conjugation of verb to be must be coherent with the subject. That's it. My head was aching because everyone was shouting. In this case, we have two activities that are happening that were happening at the same time. That's it. With present continuous in negative sentences, we said that the conjugation of verb to be is am not, is not, are not, and the contraction can be applied here. And we could say, nosotros no estamos escribiendo. We aren't writing, right? But if we want to say this in past, the only thing that's going to change is again the conjugation of verb to be. Nosotros no estábamos escribiendo. We were not typing or writing, depends on how you want to mention it, right? Because you can do it in a notebook or you can do it in your computer. Depending on the context, you could use write or type. So even though even here is very similar to Spanish because the organization between Spanish and English is almost the same. Therefore, it's not difficult to understand, I guess. And finally, to create questions, we said that present continuous, with present continuous, we use the verb to be at the beginning of a question. For example, are you listening to music? ¿Estás escuchando música? In this moment, right? In past would be, were you listening to music while the earthquake happened? ¿Estabas escuchando música cuando sucedió el terremoto? So we have a big activity that's interrupted by another activity. Obviously, the other activity must be in simple past tense. So this is why we use past continuous tense. And obviously, we can have open questions. So these open questions give you your speaker, your partner, your relative, the person you are talking to be able to speak a little more, not just saying yes and no, right? So, for example, where were you living when you were a kid? What were you doing when this happened? Who were you living with when you were 5 years old, and so on, right? So the structure is of simple past continuous tense, sorry, is incredibly similar to present continuous tense. The only thing that changes is the conjugation of verb to be, because verb to be is not going to be am, is, or are, because this is present. Instead, it's going to be was or were, because we are studying past progressive. Okay, and if you compare this tense with Spanish, with its corresponding situation in Spanish, you're going to find that the order, the organization is pretty much the same. So this is not going to be a rocket science for you. This is going to be very easy for you. So there is an exercise for you to complete it at home, but this exercise is not gradable. So you do it for yourself, not for me. And the idea is for you to read the text and check the correct um, conjugation of the verb. In this case, everything in past continuous. So, why are you asked? Why are you asked? Why are you asking about that? You have to choose the correct option in all these cases. Okay, and that will be all. So thank you very much for watching this video and staying here tuned. And don't forget that we are almost finishing this level. Therefore, we invite you to enroll to level 5 as soon as possible in order for you to be able to start on the 18th of this month your following level. I mean, level number 5. Okay. So I appreciate your work, your activities, and I wish you an excellent day. If you have any questions for me, don't forget you can mention them to me through the forums or via email. Okay. So take care, guys, and see you next time. See you on Saturday, our last class. Okay. Bye bye.